back. I know it's a little disorienting to have these long breaks, but the good news is you don't have any more breaks. We go all the way through to the end. So let me first talk about what's coming up soon, which is, of course, this week we have our regular weekly stuff. So you'll be commenting on the first civilized man, which is our reading for this week, as an example of how the Iranians think about, the ancient Iranians think about their relationship with the gods, and the sort of the story of humanity in that context. And also we'll have the quiz, which will be, as usual, about the readings and the things that we discussed today. As I mentioned before, I'm trying to bring up the topics that appear on the quiz in the class meeting. So hopefully those will sort of stand out in relief and help you to get a sense of what kinds of things might be discussed on the quiz. The proposal I will talk about in a second. Also, there are a couple of people who haven't signed up for a responses write-up. Remember that everybody needs to do a write-up of one of the online discussions. And you need to sign up for which one you're doing so that everybody has one. So make sure that if you haven't done that, go to the sign-up page on the course website and choose the one that you want to choose. All right. So at the end of the semester, there is a term paper, a research essay that involves taking an ancient work of your choice and talking about what this work tells us about that culture's perspective on religion, on the gods, on the relationship between the mortal and divine. There is a list of potential works on the syllabus, on the research essay page, at the bottom of the page, a set of links and descriptions. And these are various different kinds of works. So there are plays like Antigone and Medea. There are works there are essays like Cicero's discussion of divination. There are satires like the Pumpkinification of Claudius, which is certainly my favorite title out of all of those, in which the Emperor Claudius, instead of apotheosis, experiences, it's a play on words, where the Latin word for rising to heaven sounds like the Greek word for pumpkin, and so it's a whole satire. Anyway, the point is, you choose one of these works, and you write an essay supported by evidence from that work and additional research. And you'll choose the work and then look for similar primary sources from that culture that corroborate or contrast with the point that you're making, or scholarly writings about that culture, or about that writer, or about that work. And you'll make an argument about what that work is telling us. So this is, you choose one of the works in the syllabus, you make an argument about what it says about religion, you support that with examples from the work and additional research, and this is due at the end of the semester. What's happening now is I'm asking you to turn in a one-page proposal that basically gets you thinking about this now. And so for the proposal, I want you to choose the work that you think you might be interested in and take a look at it, see what it seems to say to you at first glance, and formulate a question about it. It could be a question as simple as, what does this work tell us about the religion of, the Greeks or the Romans or the Egyptians or whatever? Or it could be something specific. choose a play like, if you choose a play like, if you choose a play like Antigone, the protagonist Antigone is struggling with the laws of humanity, the laws of man, versus the expectations of the gods. And so, you can formulate a question, is Antigone being truly religious, or is she, is this a means of creating a rebellion against authority, or something like this? In other words, you can have a general question, but more specific is better in terms of what the work is about. But you need a question because you're going to be making an argument in the paper that you eventually write. And in your proposal, you want to make it clear what that question or problem is and provide what you think you might argue. Now, obviously, you haven't done your research yet. You haven't fully explored what's going on in this work. You haven't read it in detail. I'm not expecting to, this is not a contract signed in blood. I'm not expecting you to hold to this. The point of this is for you to think about what the possibilities are. And oftentimes people end up with switching their thesis around and saying, saying something completely different in their final paper. That's okay. The point is to express a sense of what the possible sides are and what you think you might argue in your paper. A thesis statement is a statement of opinion that someone could disagree with. And so what you need to provide here is the potential position, the potential argument, the potential, I believe such and so is what's going on in this paper. And then this is due on the 24th. And I will respond to the proposal with ideas for possible research and with discussion of things that you might need to address, things that you don't need to include, things like that. So start thinking about this now and explore what you might be interested in doing, what you might think you might be interested in saying about it. And then we'll do this stage by stage over the course of the semester. If you haven't written a large paper like this, we'll talk about citations, we'll talk about structure, we'll talk about how a position paper like this works. There's also plenty of resources on the website, including what I call the elephant pamphlet, which is a whole thing that talks about approaching writing a paper in which you are making an argument supported by evidence. And that's what you're going to be doing here. You're going to be making an argument and supporting it with evidence. And this is just the introductory paragraph of it. This is the first hint of what it is that you'll eventually write. So does that make sense? Any questions about this? I sent out an email about it too with a sample and a sample proposal, and there's more on this on the website, so you can discuss with me what you might be interested in writing about. If there's something that you want to write about, if there's a work that you want to write about that isn't on the list, I'm happy to discuss it with you. And we'll talk more about how to approach the actual work later on. So, any questions about the proposal or anything else that we are? I've burned out your brains by assigning the images essay. Now you're not ready to think about a new paper yet, right? But we have until the 24th. But please make sure that you do this. We need to do this in stages. So start thinking about it now, what you might be interested in. Make that your assignment for this week. Go to the page on the website under essays, research essay. Go to the page on the website, read through what the assignment is, and then look at the list of works on the bottom and see what kind of thing appeals to you. And then I'm happy to talk to you about it in my office hours or by email. Remember, my office hours are 5 p.m. to 5:45, Tuesday, Thursday, in my office in 292. Okay? Any other questions about stuff we're doing, what's going on? You're waiting to see if I'm better organized in my pacing. I do want to talk about the last quiz very quickly, just because we were discussing some of these things. The individuals in antiquity subject to multiple religions. This was, and part of this is because this is 3 weeks ago, so we want a little bit of reminder, a little bit of continuity. Subject to multiple religions at once because, anybody? What is it that makes you subject to multiple religions at once? Yes?
You have your own local god or local religion, but then you're interacting with others, like an empire example. So then you have duties and responsibilities to that particular society.
Right, and even within your community, you have the private religion of your household gods, and relationship with the private aspect of the divine is almost always a thing. There's always, and sometimes these are linked to ancestors, sometimes not, but you have household gods. You might have a neighborhood religious association that does something like take care of the baths or the crossroads, but has a sacred aspect. You might belong to a legion, and so your army affiliation also has a sacred aspect. Then your community, then an empire. Everybody in the ancient world has the potential to have multiple religious obligations. Family, household, neighborhood, community, state. And then, if you're an enclave of immigrants, that kind of thing, it gets more difficult. How do the Hittites see the gods as being like mortals? This was about the way that the reading was talking about the practical approach that the Hittites have toward pleasing the gods, and in order to produce the desired results, which they explicitly analogize to what you need to do to please an important mortal. In order to get what you need to assuage and build a connection and ensure the emotional praise and loyalty in order to get something in return. That transactional nature is the same amongst the Hittites for gods and for the elite mortals. And we see some of this in the divination reading too. The divination reading is very practical, very, if we do this, then we will get this, and all these redundancies. Okay, we do it this way and this way and this way, and we get we look at the results collectively and see what the answers seem to be, because the way that humans interact with the gods is, humans can speak to the gods can't speak directly to humans, and so we have to find these practical mechanisms of interaction. Political military oppression of a cult has to do with political threats. And so this is something to bear in mind. The religious stuff that we're talking about obviously is not all in a vacuum. And the fact that religion tends to form an identity means that those multiple religions can create social and political dissonance. And so this is a critical thing to bear in mind. One of the primary purposes of religion is to create identity, to create a sense of cultural identity. And with all of the ramifications that entails if their identities in conflict. Let's move on. So, Iran. I'm going to talk about the locality first, and then we'll talk about the theoretical reading. Maybe that'll work better. As it happens, it works the segues very well. We'll see. All right. So one of the first things that that people might be wondering about is there's a multiplicity of names, right? Because sometimes, especially when you're doing ancient history, this part of the world is referred to as Persia, and sometimes it's referred to as Iran. Anybody happen to know the distinction, why there's a difference, or where that where the contention between these terms comes from? Just from
Terms?
yeah. Go ahead.
The name of Persia, didn't that go back to the Shah or something like that? And then after the Shah was overthrown, it became Iran?
Well, it's there was a episode of that when the Shah was overthrown in '79, but that was just the latest iteration. This has actually been going back and forth for some time.
What is it?
Yeah.
Similar to Farsi or Farsi?
Right. So the territory to the south is called Pars, and the language originally spoken there was called Parsi. Now Farsi still exists, and so what happened is Iran is the more general term. What happened is that the existing population of the Bronze Age was centered in Mesopotamia. So we have the Sumerians that were the indigenous population, and then the Semitic peoples moved in, the Chaldeans and Babylonians and Assyrians and Aramaeans and so forth, moved into Mesopotamia during the Bronze Age and created great civilizations there. And then the Indo-European peoples came into this part of the world from the north, from the steppes to the north of the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. And some of them settled in this area, and others settled in the Indus area and became the Hindus. Both of them displacing existing populations. And as the text pointed out, they had very similar, cultural furniture to start out with. The Indo-Iranians that settled in the Indus Valley and the peoples that settled in the Iranian plateau came from the same northern culture, the same Indo-European pastoral, decentralized, non-urban, equine culture, and had similar kinds of relationships with the gods. And they sort of settled in different places. Even in this part of the world, the northern tribes were called the Medians, the southern tribes were called the Persians, and there were others alongside. The general term for all of them is Aryan, which becomes modified over time into Iranian. But this is the collective term for all of these people, but especially the peoples that settle here, is Aryan, people that derived from the Indo-European north and settled here as newcomers, encountering the great civilizations of Mesopotamia. And as the Indo-Europeans always do, they they encounter these magnificent and prosperous city-states and admire them and want that wealth and stability, and so they emulate, surpass, and eventually absorb and become the dominant power in this part of the world. So the tendency these days is to respect the fact that Iranian is the more general term, even when talking about the ancient world and what's usually referred to as the Persian Empire in history texts. There's actually a bunch of Persian empires. What most people think of when they think of the Persian Empire is the big one, the one that dominated the ancient world. But even when that one was destroyed and defeated by Alexander the Great, it was replaced with Alexander's own version of the same thing, the Hellenistic, the Greek-tinged version of the Persian Empire, which is the Seleucid Empire, the legacy of Alexander the Great. This overlaps with the Parthians, who started out as a separate empire to the north and then came to dominate the whole territory. That was eventually defeated, and a new Persian Empire was created in late antiquity and stretches into the Middle Ages. In terms of what we're interested in talking about, the main thing that these empires all have in common, apart from being, Iranian in origin, is that they embrace Zoroastrianism. They embrace the religious ideas that came about as the reforms of Zarathustra. And when the Sasanian Empire falls, it's replaced by the first Iranian Empire that doesn't embrace Zoroastrianism, which is the Islamic Caliphate. This has to do with the Muslim revolution of the 7th and 8th centuries CE. So all this is just to give you a general sense of what it is that we're talking about, the fact that there tends to be an empire as soon as the Iranians show up. They seem to be driven to control the territory of Iran, because otherwise they would be vulnerable, and to extend beyond it to make sure that they are controlling the wealthier and more powerful areas of Mesopotamia and the lands that had been controlled by the Hittites in order not to be vulnerable to them. The Persian Empire keeps rising as an exercise in protecting the territory of Iran from neighbors who would otherwise be more powerful. What's interesting about the Persian Empire in terms of religion is that the Persian Empire makes a point of not seeking to suppress local identity. It wants to make a stronger and more potent empire by ensuring that the people that are subject to it want to be there. And the way that they do that is to minimize oppression, minimize the incentive to rebel that comes from suppressing identity. And that means cultural toleration, that means minimal taxation, that means excellent infrastructure and high standard of living, and that means tolerance of local religion. The Persian Empire makes a point of not imposing the Persian religion onto its subjects. And interestingly enough, that has the effect of allowing the Persian religion to seep through the empire and become an important minority religion as a means of people, wanting to ensure their place or seeing the greater Persian identity as something that gives strength and security. In particular, the ruler of the Persian Empire is a great king who is a king of kings, who has the dominant position over all of the subject states that the Persian Empire rules. And the Persians, the great king, starting with Cyrus and going on from there, they could have chosen to present themselves as divine, or as having as having divine right, as having the blessings of the gods, or something like this. But the empire deliberately chooses not to do this. The empire ensures that the great king is seen as a man, but as a man removed from human experience. So it's difficult to see him. He's wrapped up in ceremony and ornamentation and so forth. But he's not presented as a god. He's presented as an idea that is common to all of the peoples of the Persian Empire. Is presented as a focal point of collective identity. And so, in this way, the people of this empire are not made to feel like their sense of who they are, their sense of identity that comes from their local religion is being threatened by the Persians. And this is one of the things that makes the Persian Empire so successful. It's not simply that the Iranians keep building powerful empires and need to control the surrounding territories. These empires are also successful because they are very systematic, because they follow a plan, because they ensure things like religious tolerance. So, this brings us to the kind of religion that we're talking about. Ahura Mazda is, even in the beginning, a key god. So the Iranians start out with a fairly typical pagan religion with an assemblage of gods. But even at the outset, Ahura Mazda has prominence. There's a fair amount of imagery of Ahura Mazda. He's always depicted in this way with outstretched wings, which are sometimes attached to him as conventional wings, otherwise seem to be sort of separate as a means of transport. It's meant to be sort of aesthetic and symbolic. What's your sense of what Ahura Mazda is about? How would we describe Ahura Mazda? Yeah.
They said he was the god of wisdom or order and stability in life.
Right. So there's a sense from the very beginning that for the Iranians, the key component of religion is about order and truth. So, and Ahura Mazda has a preeminent position not because he created the universe. This is something that we'll have to talk about later. The text brings up a word, demiurge. The text brings up a lot of words. I was looking at it again last night, and I was like, about a third of this article is Persian vocabulary. The demiurge is a concept that you see in some ancient religions, not all, where the universe is crafted by a force that might or might not be a god. And so the universe comes about as a result of a process of craftsmanship. And in the Iranian version, it's then Ahura Mazda that provides order and structure and truth to this formless thing. We see this elsewhere as well. The Greeks talk about how the universe was originally made up of chaos. Chaos in the Greek sense is not the idea of crazy disorder that we get from the term, so much as unformed substance. And then it's the earliest gods, Gaia and Uranus and Kronos, that provide that structure. For the Iranians, that structure is provided by Ahura Mazda, and Ahura Mazda sort of gets the credit as a creator god, not because he creates the universe, but he creates the circumstances that make the universe meaningful. Ahura Mazda creates the circumstances that make the universe meaningful, and is therefore an inspiration to human action. And what's really striking is that there are two aspects of this that seem to be both equally important. Ahura Mazda is the inspiration to truthful action, and is the inspiration to truthful poetry. And both of these are seen as being of striking importance. The devotions to the Iranian gods, and Ahura Mazda in particular, involve both a priest and a poet. Again, that might have been a little bit obscured in the reading because the reading was giving you all of the Iranian terminology for these people. But the point is that why do you think there's an emphasis on poetry? What do you think that's about? What do you think would be the significance of
So you can create works for people who are followers of religion to study.
Right, so you're creating works that have an impact upon other people. You have a means of propagating these ideas of truth. And remember that literature is meant, especially if it's written down, is meant to communicate across space and time. So this is a means of transmitting across expansive space, and also preserving across time as well. And this remains critically important to the Iranian religion even after the reforms. The other thing that struck me as interesting is that Ahura Mazda is also surrounded by supporting gods. In the original primeval Iranian religion, there are many gods, and some of them are sort of grouped around Ahura Mazda as a posse. And the the functions of these gods, it might be a matter of the way that we are reading them today. It's very difficult to get a handle on pre-Zoroastrian Iranian religion, partly because we get our information about it from later generations, from Zoroastrians talking about their mystical origins and the genesis of Ahura Mazda, the origin story of Zarathustra, and so forth. But the sense that we get is that these supporting gods are very literal. They're very literal abstractions of functional aspects of truth and order. And in particular, we have a God of judgment, but a God of judgment who is associated specifically with ensuring the strength of oaths that are made by mortals. We have a God of covenants, Mitra, who is there to enforce treaties between nations and agreements between people. And what's really interesting about Mitra is that he's presented as a warrior because he brings his strength and muscle to bear on those who break their treaties or those who are planning to betray those that they've made agreements with. And so Mitra becomes this heroic warrior figure specifically in the service of truth and order. And so Mitra sort of takes on a life of his own, and Mitra becomes the focus of later non-Iranian cults that originate in this perception of him as the champion standing to the side of Ahura Mazda, God of truth and order. And this is also brought to bear in support of the political status quo. As you can imagine, part of the effect of having a religious structure that is focused upon truth and order is that it is used to enforce the order that's imposed by the state. So that and there's the blatant sign of this is that there's a specific religious force that's attached only to legitimate kings and queens. There's a, this is our only sign of the sort of theologization. That's what we call it. The theologization of the Iranian kings. Another thing that we want to talk about a little bit more that hasn't really come up yet, but is relevant to a lot of the religious systems that we've been talking about, is the idea of cosmic geography. Anybody remember what the article is saying about how the Iranians see the universe as being structured? Yeah.
Isn't there like 4 worlds that have like 3,000 years within them, and then
right, yeah,
something like that?
There's a whole elaborate structure. You have the You have the continent of the Aryans and concentric continents around it, and you have the earth and the atmosphere and the heavens and all this structure, and part of the point that's relevant to us is, so in the human world, in the Aryan lands that are at the center of the universe, are of course the Aryan people, and close by is the tree of life, is the wellspring of humanity and everything and all other races. And then the lands of mortals are surrounded. Above is the stone vault of the heavens, beyond which is infinite light, the realm of infinite light. And below the mortal realm, underneath, is the opposite, the realm of infinite darkness. And so we see, even in the primeval Iranian religion, before Zarathustra, before the reforms that we're about to talk about, there is still a sense of dichotomy. Not just dichotomy, because you see dichotomy, all over the ancient world, but it's a dichotomy of purities. A dichotomy between infinite light and infinite darkness. It's not merely, it's not merely that there's good and bad. It's not merely that there are one kind of people and another kind of people. It's not merely that there's us and them. It's not simply, a mundane, okay, there are two things. The Iranians start out with the central premise that the nature of the universe exists between these extremes of purity. And the tree of life is in the middle. The experience that people have in the mortal realm is between one extreme of purity and the other. And so this is why we can sort of see, this is laying the groundwork for what comes later with, I forgot I had bullet points on here. Okay. Concentric continents, yes. Sacred sea with the tree of life, yes. Vault of sky, infinite lights, infinite darkness. So we have this sense of the nature of the world itself provides this dichotomy of purities as a model for what it means to be alive. And into this comes Zarathustra. So who is Zarathustra? I keep mentioning this name, and we need to talk about who he is. So who's Zarathustra?
He's the prophet, or the guy that was sent by Bora Mazda. And it was him and then Yuma, the first of all his men.
Right.
It's both of them, and yeah.
Right, so Ahura Mazda priest chooses Zarathustra in some way and presents him with visions that lead to reforms of how the Iranians think about religion. We don't know precisely when this is, but at some time before the Achaemenid Empire, sometime before Kairos and the expansion, the creation of that first empire, sometime before the 6th century, because that first Iranian empire, in the 6th century to the 4th century BCE, that first great Persian empire with the great king and that first dominion over Mesopotamia and all these lands is strongly influenced by the teachings of Zarathustra. So sometime before there, let's say the beginning of the Iron Age, around 1000, we have this guy, Zarathustra, who has visions from Ahura Mazda and results in these reforms which do what? What is it that results? What are the reforms of Ahura Mazda, of Zarathustra? What is it that happens to how the Iranians see religion as a result of these reforms? This is one of the most important questions of this week's readings, and so I'm really hoping that you all are just really shy, and a little bit, right? Yeah. You're all intimidated by my immense knowledge and beauty. That's obviously not true. I'm not that vain about my beauty. What is it that Zarathustra's visions tell him? What is Ahura Mazda's message to Zarathustra? What is it that we call the result of this? Yeah.
The thing was Avira's, something like that, where it had like a book or something that contained prayers and rituals and traditions.
Well, this is the result of that. Yeah. So part of this is that Zarathustra produces these teachings that become a body of work. That become a set of prescriptions for how the gods are related with. But the key aspect of this is that because he is both a priest and a poet, he sort of merges the professional aspects of the religion, and the basis of these writings is that they are the core writings that produce the post-Zarathustra religion are the Gevta, the poems that tell the story of Ahura Mazda, of Yuri, the first civilized man. Zarathustra also goes by the name Zoroaster. One of the things that's not necessarily clear is that Zoroaster is just a corruption of the name by the Greeks, who have a tendency of taking other people's names and making them sound. Even Jesus is a Greek corruption of the guy's name was Yeshua, but the Greeks believe that a name must have an S at the end, must have a sigma at the end, otherwise it's not a name. So they ended up calling him Jesus. Cheops, the Great Pyramid of Cheops, the pharaoh in question was actually named Khufu, but for some reason the Greeks decided to call him Cheops, and so that's what's come down to us. Likewise, Zoroaster, it's just a corruption of his name. He uses poetry and ritual to combine and codify the Iranian religion, and produces radical reform around the idea of dualism. This is the thing that I was aiming for. The reforms of Zarathustra are about dualism. So, what do I mean by dualism? Maybe we can try that one. Yes?
There's two gods in the religion.
There's two gods in the religion God.
You're most likely equally empowered, like contradictory. It's like the good and bad.
Exactly. The idea here is, and this is very interestingly represented. This is a genuine Iranian bas-relief depicting the two gods of Zoroastrian religion. So, obviously, one of them, this information is coming to Zoroaster from Ahura Mazda, the god of truth and order. And so, the first part of dualism, as expressed in Iran, is the elevation of Ahura Mazda to dominate all the other gods. The second step is that placed counter to Ahura Mazda is an equal and balanced god of falsehood and disorder. Those two things being the same, just as order and truth are the same ethically. This is ethical dualism. So this is producing a new version of religion in Iran in which truth is set against falsehood. And what's interesting about this is that, for maximum allegory, this doesn't start out this way. The universe is not created this way, two atoms. Ahura Mazda, and so we've got Ahura Mazda and Ahriman. Ahura Mazda and Ahriman are twins, twin deities, who make an ethical choice about something at the start of history, the start of cosmic history. And one of them chooses right, and one of them chooses wrong. And this polarizes the cosmos itself. So, the world, as a result, is divided between truth and falsehood, and the people of the Aryan lands are divided between truth and falsehood, the followers of Ahura Mazda and the followers of Ahriman. But it is a matter of choice. It is the production of free will. The critical component of dualism is not that some people are good and some people are bad, but that some people choose good and some people choose bad. Even the gods choose good or bad. And that the essential gift of mortals is the ability to choose, and the responsibility of life is choosing truth. So we can guess that this will result potentially in a final ordeal in which humanity collectively is judged for the choices, a sort of condensation, a compilation of all the judgments and choices that humanity has made over cosmic history. At the very end of time, there would be a final conflict, and you can look at it as a conflict between Ahura Mazda and Ahriman, but it's very clear that the real conflict is in each individual. Now, we'll talk about monotheism and Judaism later, but just from our general sense of the Judeo-Christian ethos, how do you think this compares to how Jews and Christians talk about God and Satan? Yeah.
This is definitely in like Judeo-Christian stuff. Satan is clearly like stated to be less powerful than God. Well, here it's clearly stated that they're equal in strength.
Right. If you look at and later on, one of our readings we're going to be looking at Job to sort of examine this very question. But one of the things that we see in Judeo-Christian literature is we see this sort of one-on-one face-off that might very well have been influenced by Zoroastrianism. Remember that the Jews were exiled into Babylon and had contact with the Persians while they were there, before they were eventually sent back to Judea. And while they were in Babylon, they picked up the story of the Great Flood from Sumerian tradition and other elements of Mesopotamian culture. They may also have been influenced by the dualism of Zoroastrianism, especially since a lot of the stories like Job and the New Testament temptation of Jesus by Satan are much later. But the point is that the bottom line for Judeo-Christians is there's only one true God. And the reason Satan is bad is because he is a false God, because he is ultimately only a fallen angel and not an actual divinity. Here, dualism, the idea is that the choice is there and the universe is in balance. There is that infinite light and infinite darkness within us. And we can choose one or the other. The other thing that's striking about this is that this means that you assume that it's impossible for there to be a totally devout society in Zoroastrianism, because there is a duality. There's a duality within individuals, and there's a duality within the community. There will be followers of truth and followers of falsehood. And so those who seek to maintain order will always be opposed by those who spread lies and seek to subvert it. And so as you look at this week's reading, you want to sort of bear this in mind, because one of the things that we see in the relationship between Ahura Mazda and Yuma, this first civilized man, is the nature of the choices that Yuma makes, and how this impacts on the story of humanity in the context that Yuma's in. So think about that as you're doing the reading, and in your posts, ask questions. Remember, the online discussion is partly to bring up questions that you have, as well as, especially in that first round, as you're reading it, you're looking at this and wondering, what effect does this have? How does this impact, ordinary life? Why is this character doing this? How does this, this part seems to contradict this part? Bring up questions, and then, that can be part of the discussion, as well as the things that occur to you as significant. Oh, all right. One of the other interesting things about about Zoroastrianism is that it develops a very distinctive priestly caste called the Magi. So over time, and as you notice, so there are all of these Iranian empires, right? And that they last, between the four of them that I listed up there, we're talking about 1,200 years. So Zoroastrian develops and intensifies and adapts over more than a millennium. And one of the effects of this is that the priests who are in charge of it develop a kind of authority, develop a kind of social power that comes to be very important to them to hold on to. And as a means of retaining this power, they hold on to they guard their rituals and their methodologies. They become more and more secretive. And so the practices of the priests of Zoroastrianism become more obscure, more arcane, more jealously guarded over time. They become opaque to ordinary masses. And to see them in action is mysterious and confusing, and in search of results that are clear only to those in the know. The Magi, therefore, gain a reputation for wisdom that is secretive and unknown to ordinary people. And this is where we get our idea of what of one of the connections between religion and magic, a word that comes from the name of these priests. The name Magi is the origin of our word magic from the Greek, yes.
So were the Magi that visited Jesus in the Bible, were those Zoroastrians, like priests basically, or Zoroastrian scholars?
In theory, yes. By that point, anyone who was a priest from an eastern land who acted in a strange way would be called a magi. So they weren't necessarily official Zoroastrian priests, and part of that story is legend anyway. But yeah, that's part of the point, is that they're mysterious figures from the East that represent the things that the Magi had come to represent, which is knowledge and mysteriousness. So one of the things that the article tries to address is the confusion between magic and religion, and this is a valid concern, because there's a great deal of overlap in terms of things like religious figures and gods engaging in magical activity, the granting of talismans and memory charms and love charms and visibility potions and so forth and so on. This is prevalent in pagan religions. This is prevalent in monotheistic religions. We have this overlap between things that people think of religion and things that people think of as magic. So, what's the solution? What's the difference between, in the ancient world, magic and religion? how do we distinguish between what's called magic and what's called religion? What would be, under what circumstances would you call something like a set of words to produce a desired result? You could call that prayer, and it's religion. Or you could call it a spell, and it's magic. So what's the difference? When is a set of words to produce a desired result from the supernatural magic, and when is it religion? Yeah.
Well, would it be magic if you think the power is coming from yourself, while it's religion if you're asking for a higher power to do the thing you're asking for you because you can't?
Sort of. I know what you mean. I think even in the case of magic, you're looking for divine assistance. You're using the power that we're talking about comes from. Remember, there's the divine world and the cultic interaction and the human. The power that we're talking about doesn't belong to the human world. It belongs to the divine. But a magic practitioner would be somebody who has a special adeptness in bringing about the use of that power. But that's also true of a priest. So we're not quite there yet. Yes?
I was going to say that you can't really, I guess they kind of just connect to each other, because you can't really have magic without referring to religion. Because in a sense, magic itself, it's not humane for people to have magic. Like, that source of power is already like godlike, so
Right.
you can't really.
Right. There isn't a descriptive distinction because they use the same kinds of tools and mechanisms. Therefore, the distinction is something else. The distinction is, yeah.
Would it maybe be like religion is you asking the deities to use their power, and magic is you asking the deities to lend you their power? Like,
I think that might be part of it, but even then, you look at Moses, for example, changing his staff into a snake. Is that Moses using God's power, or is that God acting independently? It's presented in Genesis as something of both. Yeah, go ahead. No? Okay. When we call something magic, there's a sense that, especially in the ancient world, what we're talking about is something that is not our ordinary religious practices. Magic is how we describe the rituals and mechanics of someone else, so that they can be framed as alien and potentially blasphemous. The blasphemy thing becomes more important in Christian times, when there is a need to enforce a prevailing religion. In pagan times and in dualist Iran, what we're talking about is the other, a sense of what is beyond the ordinary, a sense of what is exotic, and therefore potentially capable of producing exotic results. So people would turn to magic as a way of stepping beyond the limitations of what your ordinary religion is known to be capable of. One of the interesting things we see as a result of this is the ways in which, especially in the Middle Ages, religion tries to co-opt magic by performing similar functions. In particular, this is where we get like relics of the saints have magical powers, to heal the sick and so forth, because it's transmitting the power of Jesus through his most devoted followers. This is essentially using magic in order to keep people within a religion. Again, that's a very Christian thing. It's a very medieval thing. In the ancient world, you could very well have somebody who is within your society, but who practices a different set of rituals that are therefore that are therefore unusual, that are therefore exotic. Think about the Hittites. The Hittites have all these official soothsayers and augurs and divination officials who work for the empire and who practice divination as part of their ordinary daily inbox outbox kind of workday, right? And then you have the village witch, the old woman who casts the dies, who casts the lots, and who interacts with the divine in a different way. And sometimes locals and even officials will seek out the divination of the old woman as an alternative path to understanding the messages from the divine world. But you're more likely to find, magic being performed as something that is anomalous, as something that is hidden. The nature of the magic practitioner is somebody who, like the Magi, knows things that other people don't, and is willing to use that special knowledge to leverage things out of the divine, out of the supernatural world that the staid and structured and limited rules of religion do not allow. The ability to expand on existing ritual, to even coerce the divine to produce a desired result. And the methodologies involve words and images and essences. All of these, especially the use of words known only to those who are, bound to be secrets, those who have this special exotic knowledge. The Magi were familiar because, were infamous because they had knowledge of words and even of little stories, these narratives you put into spells, that no one else knows. It gives them, the words themselves give them special power because they are secret, because they are beyond ordinary experience, because they are a class of knowledge that ordinary people don't have. My final point is there's an interesting combination of, so sometimes a spell requires blood or hair or something like this, an essence from somebody that you're doing the magic on. Sometimes you hear about the idea of a person's true name, and this comes up a lot in fantasy literature. And this comes from the same idea that that only someone who's a magic practitioner who has this this kind of forbidden knowledge would know a true name for somebody and be able to use that because it's attached to the true essence. It's attached to what that person really is, not just the face that he shows, not just the choices of his actions. All right, so that's it for today. I actually got through all the stuff I wanted to talk about today. Come to me in office hours with any questions, or send me an email. Remember to make your posts and to take the quiz. And remember to look at the reading that you're interested in for the research essay, so you can start working on your proposal. And I'll be happy to talk about it with you at your convenience. But please do all those things and have a great week, and I will see you next Tuesday.